What was it Jesus once said? By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have the correct theology. No, he didn't. But sometimes we think that having the correct theology is all that really matters. All too often we forget what Jesus really said and make it all about our creeds and our doctrinal statements. Churches sometimes substitute doctrinal precision, institutional loyalty, or even, God help us, cultural alignment for the actual badge that Jesus gave his followers to wear day in and day out. And so we have been doing it all wrong. And it has hampered us greatly when it comes to being who we are meant to be. Jesus didn't say, make sure that everyone understands the Trinitarian doctrine and come up with a good creedal formula for them to say every week during worship. And make sure you say just the right words when you bless the bread or the cup. And for God's sake, kick out anyone who doesn't really fit in. No, Jesus reminded them that love had to come first, that they were to go out as his disciples and to share God's love with everyone they met. Not share doctrine, but love. Share your time, share your bread, and if they are hurting or in need, then share whatever else you can to help them. Jesus said that sort of thing because he knew that if the gospel wasn't about God's love, then it was never going to be good news. Through his example and his teachings, we were all meant to live a life based upon God's love for us and demonstrated by our love for others. Instead of doing this, too many churches have emphasized doctrinal precision or required certain practices as the true measure of whether or not you really belong. What Jesus hoped for from us, however, is that we would just learn how to love one another and to develop a pattern of self-giving love. By this, the whole world would see who we are and who God is. In fact, the gospel is only credible when it is demonstrated. Once in a while, our theology may help us shape that love, but it should never become a substitute for it. And that is what many churches have done wrong. That is not what a love first church looks like. I kind of thought that was a clever phrase, but as it turns out, there are a number of churches with that name who actually call themselves that. They are mostly independent churches who may or may not always be living up to their name, I cannot say. But if they are, then this is how they are doing that. First of all, to be a love first church, your identity must be rooted in God's love for everyone. Your congregation must exist as a group of people who are loved by God, not as a club for people who all agree with each other on everything. In a love first church, there is room for people to disagree about all kinds of things. But there are also people who never stop loving one another or stop working together. I often like to tell people about how I once had a rock polisher, great fun, just a container into which you put some abrasive and then some unpolished rocks, and then you turn it on and let it run for days, turning over and over again, maybe even weeks, before you finally open it up again and discover the beautifully polished stones inside. Interestingly, it won't work if you just put one stone in it. Magic only happens because the stones grind against each other, wearing away the rust spots until they all begin to shine. Welcome to the church. We are all still a little unpolished here, but with God's help and with each other, we can all become better, maybe even something shiny. Here you are, a necessary ingredient in this progress, in this process, no matter how irritating you might be. No offense meant. We don't have to agree with each other all the time in order to love one another and to care about each other. It's all about a shared life together with Christ as our example. Here, theology is a servant to help us understand the things of God. It is never our master. Jesus is our master. Love is really what convinces the world that God is real. Jesus knew that. That is what distinguished him from the other teachers of his day. The Pharisees were great theologians and great at applying the Torah, the rules for living correctly in every life situation. Jesus, on the other hand, loved people. He loved people like the tax collectors, and the woman caught in the act of adultery, and the 5,000 people who were hungry and had no food. He didn't ask if they were sinners or saints. He just fed them, or healed them, or sometimes helped them to find a better way to live. That was his legacy. And why even agnostics still talk about him today. It is his love that best conveyed his message to the world. So a Love First church would be different like that. It would have love as the organizing principle. All the programs and committees and even theology would serve the larger purpose of forming a community of love. As it turns out, it is not mega churches that do that, but small communities of faith that have the advantage here. If love is the metric, then small churches do that better than large churches most of the time. Large churches, if they value a love-first approach, have to create small groups within the larger whole, where loving one another can be realized. As a denomination, we were born out of just such a collection of small groups, scattered here, there, and everywhere. The people called Methodists gathered in small groups and studied Scripture together. They helped each other to grow in faith, and then they went out into the community to give bread to the poor. They were accountable to each other, but also accepting and affirming of every person. After all, everyone is on their own life journey. Helping each other along the way is just part of that. A Love First church knows how to practice love together in small, concrete ways, and not just how to shame people into behaving better. A Love First church doesn't perform worship. It invites participation in worship. Kids, elders, and everyone in between all have a place. A Love First church is all about relationships and small acts of kindness. People love to check in with each other. Love becomes visible. New people are never treated as guests, but as kinfolk. And all the studies show that people don't stay in a church because it has the right doctrine or because the preacher is good. They stay because they feel like they belong. They stay because here people have learned how to love one another. You might hear someone new say, "I'm not sure what is happening here, but it feels safe, kind, and real." That is what we want. That is what I have seen here in this place. Not all the time, but sometimes at least. It is a part of who we are, just not who we are all the time. It is certainly something that we can become. I believe that love, visible, practiced, ordinary love, is how you grow a church. We should be amazed by what Jesus actually said. "As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Here he was, day after day, teaching his disciples great truths about the very nature of God and moral teachings about how they ought to live. And yet in the end, he said, none of this will matter to your mission if you do not learn how to love one another. It is only by this means that anyone will know that you are my disciples. That was extraordinary, especially in a time when people were prone to get into theological squabbles about every jot and tittle of the law. Jesus said it is much more important for you to learn how to love one another than how to agree on everything. Jesus did not seek out those who were theologically like him. Instead, he found ways to express God's love to people like the woman at the well or the beggar in the street. That was his way. Jesus loved people first. Jesus loved them fully. And then Jesus loved them into loving others. In the end, even Paul the Pharisee got that. Although he could hold his own during any sort of theological debate, one day he would write, "If I do not have love, I gained nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And love never fails. These three remain: faith, hope, and love, he said. But the greatest of these is love. If we want to grow the church in this new age and to make new disciples in his name, this is how we will do that. Love first. And by this, everyone will know that we are his disciples. Be safe, and God bless you.